Gareth, when do you see Bitcoin surpassing all-time highs again? And how high could we go this cycle? Today, I interview expert trader Gareth Soloway
And that's such an interesting question because
to get his outlook for the stock market and the Bitcoin price in 2024. Do you generally see traditional markets rallying up until the presidential election? Gareth also shares his worst case scenario for Bitcoin.
you do have the one scenario that is kind of my black swan event for Bitcoin.
How low could Bitcoin go?
Well, if we break below this 56,000 line here,
And watch today's whole interview as I ask Gareth the big question. Is 12K on the table this cycle? Hit the like button if you appreciate these conversations. And let's start, Gareth, with your outlook for traditional markets today.
So what we've seen lately, and this is really kind of even crossing over into the Federal Reserve because of what it's kind of getting into. But basically, we had this dip, which was about an 8% dip on, I think it was on the NASDAQ, about a 5 and change percent dip on the S&P 500. And all of a sudden, we started to get weaker economic data. Now, the common thought process would be, oh my goodness, the economy's going south, less jobs, more problems for the economy. The markets would go down. But instead, the markets love to rejoice over this right now because interest rates come down and the odds of a Fed rate cut and multiple cuts go up. And so the market is so addicted at this point to printing money and cheap money that it literally will go up and people will buy stocks and drive the markets higher when things get bad. Now, there will be a pivot point, let's be fair. At a certain point when things get so bad, the markets are going to freak out because they'll think the Federal Reserve is not on point. They're behind the eight ball, if you will, or lagging. And at that point, the stock market will drop. But right now, we've had a very nice move back. S&P is basically within 1% of its all-time highs.
Do you generally see traditional markets rallying up until the presidential election and then it's reevaluate from there? Or what's your year-long take?
And that's such an interesting question because, if we continue to rally in traditional markets, it's going to keep inflation high. There's the idea that there's a wealth effect. When everyone looks at their 401k, everyone feels richer. They say, oh, I can go out to this fancy restaurant. I can buy this new TV. I can buy this. And the more demand for goods then obviously drives prices of goods higher based on supply and demand. So it is tricky because I think Biden has this kind of messy scenario where he doesn't want the stock market to crash, but at the same time, if it goes higher, then inflation is higher, and then people aren't going to like that either. So in a weird way, I'm kind of in this camp where we could see sideways markets and maybe a little downside, but I don't expect before the election so much downside that it would jeopardize his chances of reelection. But certainly, I mean, the inflation side of things has been ugly, and just the fact that it's starting to move up again is kind of scary, frankly.
And if/when the Fed does cut rates, what does that mean for Bitcoin?
So ultimately, cheaper money is good for Bitcoin, right? I mean, it's going to drive it up most likely. I think you do have the one scenario that is kind of my black swan event for Bitcoin, which is that if the stock market really came down sharply, like let's say we dropped 20-25% in the markets, then I do think that fear would kind of permeate the crypto industry and we'd see it come down. And let's keep in mind that, and I'll share my screen here and we'll take a look. We should also remember that, a lot of people say, oh, they're not correlated, right? But if we look at the S&P, and this is the S&P topped and made its high over here in basically March. And if we go to Bitcoin's chart, Bitcoin also made its highs in March. So Bitcoin's been kind of going sideways to lower in that period of time. And we've also seen the stock market kind of off of its all-time highs pulling back. So that would be the one case where I would say, oh my goodness, we could head back to 50K, maybe even lower. But taking that out, let's just say the stock market doesn't drop significantly, maybe only 5 to 10% off of its highs, then I think you have to rely on this chart of Bitcoin where basically we have this channel. This is what we would refer to as a bullish channel because it's coming off of a steep move up. Essentially, what's happening here is prices digesting the recent gains. And this is very normal for Bitcoin. And as long as it stays within this lower line of the channel, you would consider this to be bullish and an eventual breakout scenario. So as a technician, remember, I don't want to be, I'm not all bullish all the time or all bearish all the time. It's more like, okay, we're in this channel right now, so I remain neutral to positive on my bias. If we break below it, then I have to reevaluate. And if we break above it, then it's game on, markets, Bitcoin surging to new all-time highs.
Gareth, I want to delve into that a little deeper because I remember around the Bitcoin halving, multiple weeks ago, you were saying you think Bitcoin kind of topped out at around $73,000, and Twitter ragged on you for it, but you were
Hmm.
right
Yeah.
retrospectively because you were betting on people, betting on markets rather than an
Right.
asset. Um,
Right.
what is your why did you call the top back then, and what's your outlook now?
Yeah, so a couple things. So based on chart action is that there's an elasticity to a market, right? And this could be Bitcoin, this could be a stock, this could be a commodity. It's that at a certain point when there's too much upside, there becomes too many people on the bullish side. And just naturally markets tend to, when you have, let's say you have 10 people in a market and all 10 of them go long Bitcoin in that market, there's no one left to buy. And so you start to run out of buyers. Now, we could talk about the spot ETFs, but that was really an earlier factor that was driving it up going into the halving. And now you've kind of gotten to a point where it's more of a mixed bag. And I think people also have to realize that the spot ETFs, yes, they're net positive, but you still get people that buy Bitcoin through the spot ETFs that will sell into rallies as well. And so you have those factors kind of coming together with the chart just being overextended. And I also was looking at other factors like other chart indicators as well that just told me that it was time for this to start to pull back just a little bit. And what we see is around major events, like if you remember the spot ETF, we had a pop to like 49,000 and then it corrected about 20%. And so it makes a lot of sense right around the halving, we would have a top and then kind of this void is created where investors are like, okay, well, that was a lot of hype to the halving, but it's over. Where's my next catalyst? And people always want that catalyst, especially in cryptocurrency. And we just don't have it at this point. There's nothing new. In fact, we've been seeing more potential negative regulation, people talking some negative stuff. And I think that just puts people on edge as well, especially more of the stock market crowd, right? The stock market crowd is more older school investors. They want an asset that has clear sailing going forward, not something that's still being quarreled over in the government, unfortunately, even though I'm a huge longer term fan. So I think that was a lot of it to do with what was going on the charts. And now we're just in this consolidation phase, which is actually net bullish right now.
I mean, Bitcoin seems to be clear to this cycle regulatory wise. Generally speaking, it's
Right.
Ethereum Foundation and Uniswap and all those others. Are you saying the
Yes.
traditional market just kind of lumps them all together?
Yeah, I mean, and that until the traditional markets and Bitcoiners and crypto people just have to give people that are not into the markets of crypto a little slack. They just don't understand the nuances quite as much. I mean, if you go ask some, 70-year-old, could you explain the difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum? My guess is they're not going to be able to do it. So just people have to just give them a little slack. It'll come over time and that'll be fine. But right now, absolutely, it's the crypto markets are lumped together as a whole, even though specific crypto people know the difference.
Gareth, when do you see Bitcoin surpassing all-time highs again? And how
Ooh.
high could we go this cycle?
So I actually think like if the stock market doesn't correct significantly, like let's say we just have these low ball corrections of 5 to 10%, then I think later this year you'll make a new all-time high. And I actually think if we do take out the $74,000 high, we actually could be looking at a target of around 100,000. And I'll share my screen in terms of how I come to that conclusion. And so what I want to do here is on the Bitcoin chart, we're going to remove all our lines. And what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our 2017 peak. And this is just a simple trend line, what I'm going to put in here. But if we take that high and we connect it to the bull market high, so what we're doing here is we're connecting bull market high to bull market high. And then if we drag it down and drag that line out, what we can see is amazingly that line happens to coexist right around that $100,000 level. So in general, if we do break out above 74,000, I think it honestly climbs relatively quickly within a few months to about the 105,000 level before kind of stalling out for its next pullback.
Is it that easy? Is like the basic trend line, is it that easy?
Um, Well, that's the big question, right? Oftentimes it's not quite that easy where it'll try to fool people. It'll go briefly above 74, then it'll come back down. But in many times you can look at these levels. And again, just to kind of show you guys something really cool, let's go to the S&P. Well, let's go to the NASDAQ 100, right? So if we take a look at the NASDAQ 100 and we go back
Share
to
your screen if you would.
oh, I apologize. Yes, thank you. So if we go to the NASDAQ 100, which is the top 100 stocks in the NASDAQ, and if we go back to the .com high and we take that high and we connect it to the high of 2021, which was also the Bitcoin high, and we extend that line out, if we look at where we got this latest correction in the NASDAQ, it was right at that level as well. So again, there's no magic sauce in technical analysis. All we can do is try to look at things and like, where would it make sense for resistance to be? So in that way, it would be kind of following the same trend of using these other charts and finding these levels where they've pulled back in the past.
And do you see the surpassing all-time highs in this summer, or is it closer to the fall and then cycle top beginning of next year, generally speaking?
Wow, that's definitely putting me on the spot here on this one. So I'm going to put it to you this way. And again, this is how, as a technician, I have to put it. Let me share my screen again and just go over this. So one of the things that I'm really following on this chart is this channel. And I had it on the line before, but what we do is we just connect these highs. We drag a perfectly parallel line down. And so suffice it to say this is that because we're stuck in this range, until we break out of the range one way or the other, this is a range-bound Bitcoin market. It is what it is. It's kind of boring, frankly. But if we break above the 60, looks like right over here around 69,000 level, that's when I think within literally 2 to 4 weeks of breaking 69, that will be what we'll take out the highs. So I can't tell you, obviously, if it's going to, will we do that in the next, couple months in the summer, or is it going to be later this year? But suffice it to say, when this line breaks, the shorts will have to cover. And so you'll get a lot of short covering, which will be forced buying. And then the bulls will just go nuts over that breakout, in my opinion, especially smart money like the institutional money will be watching this level. But just keep in mind, on the reverse side, as a technician, I have to look at probabilities both ways. What are the risks? Well, if we break below this 56,000 line here, then pretty much within, could be a couple weeks to a month as well, we're probably down to 52,000 and maybe even touching the spot ETF approval high of around 49,000. So again, the best thing I could say is just watch the channel, and whichever way it breaks, that's the way price will go in the near term, and pretty quickly too.
Is 12K on the table this cycle?
No, I mean, I'd be shocked. Once we broke above 30, that 12K was dead, to be honest. I think if we were to see, let's say we get a really bad, like, Great Recession, a la 2008, 2009, I do think that the panic, if we saw, let's say, 40%, 50% sell-off in the stock market, could bring us back to 30. But 30 now is like a massive line in the sand. That was where I was really watching back a ways, where if once we got above that, it's like, all right, bear market over, bull market starts. So that 30K now becomes a master major level.
Gareth, I love your perspective. I want to have you back in 2-3 months, revisit some of these charts. But final thoughts for the Altcoin Daily Army.
Oh, man. So Altcoin Daily Army, first of all, you guys rock. You follow some of the greatest minds here with these two gentlemen. And I would just say that, just be ready for the unexpected with the elections coming up. There's a lot of geopolitical stuff. The economy's beginning to turn. So again, don't be shaken out. There could be some deep down moves, but stick with your long-term thesis. As long as your long-term thesis is what it is and it doesn't fail, then Bitcoin on dips should be a buying opportunity.